as traders in the form of the British come to India in 1600 as trader in the form of East India Company, which had the exclusive right of trade in India under a charter guaranteed by Queen Elizabeth I. In 1765, the company, which till now have purely trading company, which till now have purely trading functions, obtain the Diwani rights over revenue and civil justice. In Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha. This started its career as a traditional power in 1858 in the wake of the Ipoh Mutiny. The British Crown assumed direction reason responsible for the governance of direct India. This rule continued until the India was granted independence on 15 August 1947. With independence came the need for a constitution, hence a community continents assembly was formed for this purpose in 1946, and on January 26, 1950 the constitution came into being. However, various features of the Indian constitution and polity have their roots in the British rule. There are certain events in the British rule that laid down the legal framework for the organization and function of government and administration in the British India. Their events There were certain events in the British rule that laid down the legal framework for the for mint and administration in British India. These events have greatly influenced our constitution and our polity. They are explained here in a chronological order under two major headings: the company rules and the crown rules. The company rules is 1773 to 1858, and the crown rule is 1858 to 1947. The company rule 1773 to 1858, regulating act 1773. This act this act of a great constitution before constitution importance, as it was the first step taken by the British government to control and regulate the affairs of the East India Company in India. It recognized for the first time the political and administration function of the company, and it laid a foundations of certain administration in India. The feature of act were as follow: it designed the government of Bengal as the Governor General of Bengal and created an exclusive council of 4 members. सबसे पहला फीचर था गवर्नर ऑफ बंगाल बन गया, गवर्नर ऑफ जनरल ऑफ बंगाल, यानी हेड हो गया, सेंट्रल हेड, एंड क्रिएट एन एक्सक्लूसिव काउंसिल ऑफ 4 member to assist him. The first such Governor General was Lord Warren Hastings. Lord Warren Hastings was the first general governor. It was made the governors of Bombay and Madras presidencies. Subordinates the Governor General of Bengal. Unlike earlier, when the three presidencies were independent of one another, it provided for the establishment of a Supreme Court. At कलकत्ता 1774 में सुप्रीम कोर्ट, सबसे पहला फर्स्ट सुप्रीम कोर्ट इंडिया का जो एस्टेब्लिश हुआ था वो कलकत्ता में हुआ था, और वो सन था 1774. कंपेयरिंग वन चीफ जस्टिस एंड 3 जजेस. पहला सुप्रीम कोर्ट जो इंडिया का था उसमें 1 चीफ जस्टिस और 3 जजेस थे अदर्स. It provides the severance of the company from engaging in any private trades or accepting presents or bribes from the natives. It strengthened the control of British government over the company by requiring the code of directors, governing body of the company, to report on its revenue, the civil and military affairs in India. तो ये थे फीचर्स ऑफ एक्ट एज फॉलोइंग. अब हम पढ़ेंगे अमेंडमेंट्स एक्ट ऑफ 1781. In a bid rectify the defects of the Regulating Act of 1773, the British Parliament passes the Amending Act of Settlement. It exempted the Governor General and the Council from the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court for the act done by them in their official capacity. Similarly, it also exempted the servants of the company from the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court for their official actions. It excluded the revenue matters and the matters arising in the collection of revenue from the jurisdictions of the Supreme Court. It provides that the Supreme Court was to have jurisdictions over all the inhabitants of Calcutta. It also requires to the court to administer the personal law of the defendants. Hindus were to be tried according to the Hindu law, and the Muslim law were to be tried according to the Mohammedan law. Mohammedan law. It laid down that the appeal from the provincial court could taken to the Governor General in Council and not to the Supreme Court. It empowered the Governor General in Council to frame regulating for the Provisional Code of Councils. Now we know the Pitt's India Act. Pitt's India Act 1784 में हुआ था. The next important act was the Pitt's India Act. Pitt's India Act 1784 following of the Code Act were as follow. It distinguished between the commercial and political function of the company. It allowed the board of director to manage the commercial affairs but create a new body called board of control to manage the political affairs. Thus it established a symbol system of double government. It empowered the board of control to supervise and direct all operations of the civil and military government of revenue of the British pro season. In India, thus, the act was significant for two reasons. First, the company territories in India were for a first called a British progress in India, and second, the British government was the given the supreme control over company affairs and its administrations in India. Act of 1786. Please like करें. Act of 1786. In 1786, Lord Cornwallis was appointed as the Governor General of Bengal. He placed two demands to accept that post. He should be given power to override the decisions of his council in special cases. He would also be the commander in chief. Accordingly, the Act of 1786 was enacted to make both the provinces. Now, the Charter Act 1793. Take a break. Charter Act of 1793. The feature of this act were as follow. It extend the overriding power given to the Lord Cornwallis over his council to all further future Governor General and governments of presidencies. It gives the Governor General more power and control over the government of subordinates presidencies of Bombay and Madras. It extended the trade monopoly of the company in India for another period of 20 years. It provides that the commander in chief was not be a member of Governor General Council unless he was so appointed. It laid down that the members of Bengal of Council control and their staff were henceforth to be paid of the Indian revenue. तो देखिए ये था चार्टर एक्ट ऑफ 1793। इसमें हमने 5 पॉइंट्स पढ़े, जिसमें पहला पॉइंट में लॉर्ड कॉर्नवालिस के बारे में पढ़ा, सेकंड में हमने बॉम्बे एंड मद्रास के बारे में पढ़ा, थर्ड में हमने एक्सटेंशन ट्रेड मोनोपोली ऑफ कंपनी पढ़ा, फोर्थ में कमांडर इन गवर्नर जनरल पढ़ा और फोर्थ में बोर्ड ऑफ काउंसिल्स के बारे में पढ़ा। इसमें एक चीज़ और गौर करने वाला है कि इसमें 20 ईयर्स कहीं पे था, हाँ यहाँ पे थर्ड में पीरियड ऑफ 20 ईयर एक्सटेंड हो गए थे। चार्टर एक्ट ऑफ 1830। The feature of this act were as follows. It abolished the trade of monopoly of the company in India. The Indian trade was thrown open all the British merchants. However, it continued the monopoly of the company over trade in tea trade with China. यहाँ टी ट्रेड विथ चाइना स्टार्ट हुआ था Charter of Act of 1813 में it asserted the sovereignty of the British Crown over the company territories in India. It allowed the Christians missionaries to come to India for the purpose of enlightenment the people. यहाँ पे क्रिश्चियन मिशनरीज आ गए थे और हमें क्रिश्चियंस में कन्वर्ट करना स्टार्ट किया था चार्टर एक्ट ऑफ 1833 से. It provided for the spread of Western education among the inhabitants of the British territory in India. It authorized the local government in India to impose taxes on person. They could also punish the person for not paying taxes. यहाँ पनिशमेंट देना भी स्टार्ट हो गया था ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट का कि हेवी टैक्स लगाएंगे. अब हम पढ़ेंगे चार्टर एक्ट ऑफ 1833. This act was finally stepped down centralizations in British India. The feature of this act were as follows. It made the Governor Generals of Bengal as the Governor General of India and vested him all civil and military powers. Thus, the act created for the first times governors, government of India having the authority over the entire territorial areas posed posed by the British in India. Lord William Bentinck ये कौन थे? फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया. कब इलेक्ट हुए थे? 1833 में. It deprived the governor of Bombay and Madras of their legislative powers. The Governor General of India was given exclusive legislative power for the entire exclusive legislative power of entire British India. The law made under the previous act were called regulations, while the law made under this act were called as act. It ended the activities of the East India Company as a commercial body which became a purely administration body. It becomes providing that the company's territories in India were held by it in trust for His Majesty. The Charter Act of 1833 attempted to introduce a system of open communication communication for the section of civil servants and debarred from holding any place, offices, and employment under the company. However, these provisions were neglected after oppositions from the Code of Direction. अब हम चार्टर एक्ट ऑफ 1853 को पढ़ेंगे. This was the last of the series of Charter Act. passed by the British Parliament between 1793 and 1853. It was the significant constitution of landmark. ये लास्ट चार्टर एक्ट था, इसके बाद ब्रिटिश रूल हटकर क्राउन रूल स्टार्ट हो जाएगा. It separated for the first time the legislative and an executive function of the Governor General Council. It provided for the administration of six new members called legislative councillors to the council. In other words, it established a separate Governor General's legislative council, which came know to be known as the Indian Central Legislative Council. These legislative wings of the council functioned as a mini parliament, adopting the same procedures procedures as the British Parliament. Thus, the legislation for the first time was treated as the special function of the government requiring especially machinery and special process. It introduced an open competitions systems of sections and requirement of the civil servants. The convenient civil services was thus through open the Indian also according to the Maculary Committee. The Committee on the Indian Civil Services was appointed in 1854. It extended the company rule and allowed allowed it to retain the procession of British crown, but it did not specify charters. This was the clear indication that the company's rule could terminate at any time the parliament liked. It introduced for the first time local representation in the Indian Central Legislation Council. Of the six new legislative members of the Governor General Council, four members were appointed by the local provincial government and in enactment of Madras, Bombay, Bengal and Agra. अब हम द क्राउन रूल कल से पढ़ेंगे. गुड बाय एंड गुड नाइट. द क्राउन रूल जो कि 1858 से लेकर के 1947 तक पड़ा. द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया एक्ट 1858. गुड नाइट दोस्तों। हाँ, लाइक करना ना भूलें। अगर आपको नींद नहीं आ रही है तो और भी पढ़ सकते हैं।